Our objective in Photoshop now is to make an alpha channel that will give us this little picket fence effect at the top of the bag. We're going to go to our original texture, and I'm going to select the UV map. I'll right click and I'll choose duplicate layer, and from the duplicate layer option window where it says documents, I'll click and choose new. So I've been able to separate it out by itself essentially. I'll now close the original texture, turning off the UV map and saving again. Now we're going to need this to be black once again, the UV map. With the transparency locked, I'll hit D on the keyboard to go to my default black and white on my toolbar, and I'll hold down the Option or Alt and click Delete. With the transparency locked, I'll hold down the Option or Alt and hit Delete, and now my grid appears to be black again. We're going to start by adding a new layer from the bottom of the layer window, and I'm going to make that layer white. I could use the paint bucket and put the white on top and do it that way, or I can leave it where it is and hold down Command and hit Delete, or Control Delete on a PC. I'm going to switch the layers so that the white layer is below my UV map. Now I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to make this layer the black content, which will define the transparent edge of our geometry. Hitting M on the keyboard, I'll make a selection roughly across the top, and I'll just fill that with black. Now I want to make that little kind of picket fence effect. I'm going to go to my brush settings, window, and I'll go to brush settings. And if I hit B on the keyboard to get my brush, I'm looking for a brush that's there by default that looks like a little box. And I've got the box set for 24 pixels, and I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees. Down in the spacing, I'm going to separate it out so that those little boxes are barely touching one another. Now in my document window on that black layer, I'll click once and hold the Shift key and drag across. I'm going to save this as a PSD. The alpha information has to be a JPEG inside of Maya. I've saved that so if I need to edit in any capacity, I can come back and generate a changed version of the JPEG we will render now without having to rebuild the whole thing. Now this has to be in the opposite direction. I'll hit Command T, I'll right click inside and choose Flip Vertical. And now I want to have this so it's just in off the top edge of my UV map. I'm going to zoom in on this. I'll drop the transparency of the layer in the layer window down to about 50%, and I'll use my Move tool to adjust it just a little bit below the top edge of my geometry. I'll return the opacity to 100%. I'll turn off the UV map, and now I'll save that out as a JPEG. Now I'm ready to return to Maya and apply it to my geometry. I'll select my geometry inside of Maya, and then I'll right click and choose Material Attributes. Scrolling down in the attribute window, I'll open up the Geometry tab, and I'll follow the Opacity tab out by clicking on the checkerboard at the right-hand end of the slider bar. Going to File, I'll click on the folder next to Image Name, and I'll find my JPEG. And now I can see my alpha channel has been applied. It will not appear transparent until we actually start to do the lighting. But there's one last adjustment we need to make in order for that to happen. I'm selecting the geometry, and I'm going to where it says P Cube Shape 1. Opening the Arnold tab, I want to make sure that Opaque is checked off. If that's not checked off, there will be no transparency even with the Arnold render. These are all things we would kind of preview and check when we start to render.